Hi guys, thanks for tuning into this episode. We have an awesome guest. We have Terry McDougall, who is an executive and a career coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Terms. Welcome, Terry, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Nick, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
How's it all going over there?
It's great. It's great. We got a new president today in the United States, so I'm excited.
Terrific. Let's jump straight into it. For the listeners, who is Terry McDougall?
Well, you kind of gave the description of me as a professional. So I am an executive and career coach, and I'm an author. I also was a longtime marketing executive, mainly in financial services for about 30 years, actually. I'm also married. I got three kids. Um, like to travel, like to read, like to do kind of crafty things, painting and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Sensational. Where have you traveled to? Internationally or domestically?
Oh, yeah. I've been to a lot of places in the United States for sure. I've actually lived in a lot of places in the United States because my dad had a job when I was a kid where we moved around a lot. I have probably lived in, I don't know, 10 or 12 states in my life. Um, but internationally, I mean, I've been to Mexico, I've been to Canada many, many times. I've been to the UK. Haven't gone to that. I've been to the Caribbean, but have traveled a lot in the United States.
Sensational. Tell me about your family and life growing up.
Well, as I mentioned, I guess I'll start with the fact that my parents were really young when I was born. My mom was only 16 when she found out that she was pregnant with me. She actually had to drop out of school after grade 10 to get married. My dad was 21. Um, they, obviously high school student. She didn't have any, professional experience. My dad was pretty young, and he had just graduated from high school as well. He didn't go to college or anything. He was actually driving a school bus. That was his job whenever I was born. But he did, as a new dad and new husband, he realized he had to get a job that would pay a little more than a school bus driver, and he got a job with the telephone company here in the United States. And thankfully, he handy person. He knew how to do electrician work and welding and that kind of thing, and so he got a job with the telephone company, um, on these, like, in some ways construction crews that at the time, this was back in the 1960s, they were taking the long distance cables, so the long distance telephone cables, and they were burying them underground. That was like a giant, basically construction project that they were doing all over the Southeast. And it it required our family to move quite a lot, because basically he'd be working on one project and they'd finish it up and then they would send him to the next town or the next state. So as a result, I lived in about 40 different places by the time I was 11 years old.
What?
And sometimes we might only live someplace for a couple months. Once I started school, my parents did try to stay in one place for that school year, but I went to a different school every year until I was in fifth grade. And so that was always, that was tough, obviously. I mean, I was always the new kid. Um, it definitely taught me a lot of things, but it also, I definitely was resilient and adaptable. As somebody that, and still can go into a situation, I can pretty easily size things up pretty quickly because I had to do that a lot when I was growing up. But it also made me a little bit standoffish. Like, I didn't really make friends that easily because, why get attached?
Yeah, exactly.
um, it's something that, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot better about, and I really enjoy meeting new people. But when I was younger, and even into my young adulthood, um, I really a lot of times allowed other people to sort of approach me, like if they wanted to be friends with me and they kind of made the first move, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. But I wasn't a lot of times being the one that would reach out. I was very self-sufficient, and I think that came from just my upbringing and having to sort of keep my own counsel and, not have friends from year to year to year in school.
That's sensational and great insights. What makes you feel inspired in life now?
You know, I've always been a real creative person and somebody that gets excited by possibilities. And what's inspirational for me is to um, kind of look at a situation and to see the opportunities and then to develop a plan to make it happen. And the super exciting thing for me is when it does happen. And I was lucky enough in my career to work in a field where you did that quite a lot. I mean, in marketing, that's what it's all about. It's about, kind of understanding what the situation that the business has, and then developing, or actually envisioning what it could be. Sometimes, the company setting that, like, oh, we want to sell so much, or we want to increase revenue by so much, and then thinking about, like, well, how are we going to develop a marketing strategy to make that happen, and then once that's approved, how are we going to execute on it to make it happen. And it's, in some ways, I feel like it's a little bit addictive, because once you do that and you get the reward of meeting the goal, and then you're like, oh, I love doing this, I want to do it again, I want to get that feeling of accomplishment. Um, and quite frankly, as a coach, there's a lot of similarities, in that, when I'm working with somebody that comes to me and they're not happy with the situation that they're in, and we sort of evaluate what's going on and kind of get at the heart of what they want to happen in their life or their career, and then, together sort of design a roadmap to get there, and then they start working it and they actually reach their goal. To me, it's nothing better, honestly. Um, and quite frankly, a lot of times when people come, they've tried a lot of different things and they feel maybe a little discouraged, and that's part of the reason why they've chosen to, find somebody that can help them, because everything they've done up to that point hasn't worked. Um, so I like helping people, and I really believe that people deserve to have good things in their lives, and so it's very fulfilling to help them get that.
Definitely, and it's rewarding. I couldn't imagine obviously doing it. The comfort you would feel for making someone's life better and obviously helping them achieve their goals. So yeah,
Yeah.
respect on that. Talk to me and elaborate on your professional career. So from where you started to where you are now, with obviously writing the book and everything that's transpired.
Mhm. Yeah, well, let's see. Back in college, I studied economics, and it wasn't because I really loved economics or anything, but I thought about being a business major. But at the university where I attended, if you got into the business school, you had very few electives. It was pretty set course of study, and I thought back then, like, well, economics is a good uh, foundation for business, but it gave me a lot more freedom about the other classes that I would take. And I really did like, I'm really somebody who's sort of right between the right and left brain, right? I'm creative, but I'm analytical too. And so I like taking the art classes and the language classes and stuff like that. And so that gave me the freedom to do that. When I got out of school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to college in Virginia, and when I got out, I went to visit my boyfriend who lived in Boston, Massachusetts, and it started out as a visit, but while I was there, I thought, well, there's a lot of opportunity here, and I'll just look for a job. His mom had actually done some career counseling, and she gave me a book that's called "What Color Is Your Parachute?" And she said, before you even start applying for jobs or interviewing for jobs, read the book and do all of the exercises. And it's probably some of the most important career advice that I ever got, because it made me look at my career differently than the way that I would have approached it had she not given me that book and given me that advice. Because that book really made me kind of do some introspection and say, what do you like to do and what are you good at? And that was the first time that I ever thought that, like, oh, you should pursue a career that is aligned with your natural strengths and also the things that you enjoy doing. And so that I kind of narrowed it down to a couple different areas that I should look in. It was like marketing and publishing or advertising. It ends up that I got a job with a publishing company. I was in the ad sales department as an administrative assistant to the sales staff. And so I learned a ton. I learned a lot about, I worked with the advertising agencies that were sending in their advertisements for the magazine. I was, learned a lot about sales. The company also put conferences on, so I learned a lot about that. And so that just really kind of got me on the road to working in the marketing arena. The next job that I got after that was with another publishing company. I was in the doing direct mail production, so I was learning a lot about lists. And anyway, so that just sort of got me on the path of marketing. I'd say several years into my career, I'd been working in that direct mail area, mostly I was interacting with the printers and stuff like that. And I really wanted to get into more of the strategic part of marketing. And every time that I would apply for the job, I never would get a job for like a marketing manager type role. And so I decided at that point that, it's sort of like what they say, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you don't get a different result, that's kind of or if you do the same thing over and over again and you keep getting the same result, it's the definition of insanity. And I just kind of realized, okay, I'm not getting the result I want. So I decided to go back to school. And it was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, to tell you the truth. It was very, a little bit, somewhat impulsive. I'd been thinking about it for a really long time, but one of my friends at work, I worked really closely with her, and she got married and she moved away. And it opened my eyes up to the fact that I'd been at that company for about 4.5 years. And it opened up my eyes that if I didn't take control of my career, that everything would change around me and I would just still be sitting there, and I really wouldn't have any control over it. And so I decided to go back to school. And it's funny, this is actually before everything was on the internet. I called the university and they were like, yeah, the deadline is like 2 days from now. And so I actually, my boyfriend lived near that university, and he went over. And again, this is like before everything was online. He went over and got a paper application, and I filled it out, and he took it back for me. And I got in, and like within a couple months, I had quit my job, and I was going to business school full time. And when I got out, a year and a half later or so, I got out, and sure enough, it really put me on the track, pure strategic marketing. So I was I was a marketing manager for a publishing company. And then I also got married right around the time that I got out of business school. And my husband and I were thinking, we lived in the Washington, D.C. area at that time. And it's pretty expensive, for a young couple starting out. And so we were thinking that we might move to a different marketplace that was maybe a little less expensive. And a friend of mine from business school worked at a bank in North Carolina, and he told me about an opportunity there. And I applied, I got it. We moved to North Carolina, and that started my marketing career in financial services. And I actually did that for 21 years for 2 different banks. And, the funny thing about financial services, and actually with my background, economics is like a really good fit for going into financial services. But when I was 22 and getting out of college, that seemed like the most boring thing in the world to me, to work for a bank. But I really didn't know anything about, especially B2B financial services, which is what I spent most of my time doing. And so I probably had 4 jobs at the first bank I worked for. I was there for 9 years, just supporting different businesses within the organization. And then in 2005, I got recruited away from that bank to a bank that's here in Chicago, and we moved. And that was a really big promotion for me. And so I was there for 12 years, and I also had about 4 jobs there, just supporting different businesses. I'd say like the last couple years that I was there, I felt like I'd sort of outgrown what the opportunities were with that company. And it also was a foreign owned company. So I was working for them in the United States and just in the amount of time that I worked there, they were really moving more and more of the kind of strategic control for things to the home country. And so there was a little less room for upward mobility in the States. So I kind of came to a conclusion that I felt like I had, run my career had run its course at that place. And they were sort of going through some restructuring that allowed me to leave. I was in a position that I didn't have to get another job right away. And because I'd spent a couple years not really loving what I was doing there, I spent a little time just like detoxing, just like getting a little R&R and really thinking about what I wanted to do next. So I kind of went back to that advice I got right at the beginning of my career, which was like, what are you good at and what do you like to do? And in all the years that I had been a leader within marketing, I had spent a lot of time coaching and mentoring people on my teams. And it had served me well in terms of, if you're a leader, you can only be as successful as, what the people on your team can empower you to do. And also I just really enjoyed helping people develop and grow. And so I thought, well, hey, I had hired coaches at a couple times in my career. So I was familiar with the profession. So I decided to get a certification in coaching and, to kind of leverage my professional experience, so many years working in the corporate world, and marry that with the training and coaching. So that brings me to where I am today. As an executive and career coach.
That's really insightful. And just talking to your financial services background, I actually worked in financial services too for a couple of years, so I can completely relate to you on that, and even a bit of the marketing sides because I used to deal with those teams and the people there. So, yeah, I can totally relate to that. Tell me, how have you handled the pandemic and how has that affected your life?
Well, I have clients that are all over the country here in the United States. So I am typically meeting with my clients by phone or by Zoom anyway, even in pre-pandemic times. So from my day to day, what it's like going to work, it's pretty much the same. But I did used to go out and, do a lot more networking, and obviously that's not happening. What I've seen in terms of people that I work with, I work with people both to help them be more effective in their roles, but also I will work with people that are in job search. And a lot of people got laid off during COVID. And so that part of my business got to be, pretty busy. I will say that I was I was a little bit worried. I mean, as a career coach, you can't, I'm not a recruiter, I'm not, an agent, I'm not going out getting people jobs. I'm teaching them the skills and I'm working with them on their mindset and, accountability and everything so that they take the steps they need to be effective in their job search and to, show up as their best selves. And I was a little bit worried that, like, okay, are there going to be jobs out there, when people hire me, are they going to actually even be able to get interviews? And I was pretty pleasantly surprised that a lot of people I worked with got laid off, interviewed, got hired, and got onboarded all virtually. So there were definitely, or there still are, opportunities out there. Some sectors have been hit harder than others, like hospitality and travel have been hit really, really hard. So I think it's going to take quite a while, probably post-vaccine, for us to see those sectors come back. But, I was pleasantly surprised about that. And then for the other part of my business, the people that, are employed and they just want to be better, I noticed that I think it's a little bit the change in perspective that COVID forced on us, right? That people are getting up and they're, going to their spare bedroom to work every day, right? It caused a lot of people to take a second look at what they do for a living. And for some people, I think that they started questioning, like, do I really want to do this anymore? Or maybe they were already tolerating, some areas of discomfort. And in the past, they were just sort of caught up in the routine of it. So they never had the time and space to question whether they could do anything about it. And there were a lot of people that sort of woke up and said, you know what, like I've been struggling with this situation and I want to get some help with it. So there were a number of people that sort of raised their hand about like, now's the time. Maybe when my commute's not so long because it's just down the hallway, I have the time to focus on developing skills that's going to make me better in the long term.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Tell me about your book. So obviously you've done amazing with it. I actually saw there was on Amazon. There's only one copy left, so that's obviously pumping through the sales of them.
Yeah, well, my book, Winning the Game of Work, um, it really started off actually as a blog. When I first left my job, I had a lot of thoughts. I was thinking back over lessons I learned, situations I faced, and I just decided to, put those in blog posts. And I was getting good feedback from people. If I talk about a situation or something, and people would email me and be like, "Oh my gosh, like that, you really put something in perspective for me," or "I had that same situation," and so it made me realize that people were responding to it. And I wrote the blog for a couple years, and at some point somebody opened my eyes up to the fact that I probably had enough content to write a book. um, it didn't end up that I just like downloaded the blogs and put them in a book. It just was the blogs ended up being sort of like the seeds of the book. I wrote a lot more um, after that, and actually I interviewed a lot of people for the book too. But the purpose of the book was to share lessons that I learned in my career. I was always, I talked about, my parents, having they didn't go to college. I was the first generation college graduate. So, going out into the corporate world and working in the headquarters, in a management type role, that was foreign to my family. There was nobody saying, "Oh, this is how you navigate the waters in the, politics of the corporate world." And so I was ambitious, but I also was just like learning a lot of stuff on my own. I was, buying books and reading articles and stuff just about leadership and how you get ahead. I was really ambitious. Um, and even with all of that, a lot of times I still couldn't figure out like, okay, why does that guy why did that guy down the hall who never comes to meetings on time and doesn't return emails and everything, why did he get promoted? I don't get it. Right. And
Yeah.
as time went on, I think that, I learned a lot of lessons, but also I had some good mentors that sort of um, framed things for me so that I could, or, I think about this one mentor that I had. He sort of like literally pulled the curtain back and was like pointing out to me what was really going on. Like, because you can look at what you think is going on the surface, but a lot of times there's a lot more going on there than what you realize. And once I started looking a little bit more deeply and kind of seeing the interrelationships of things, I was like, wow, okay, there's a lot more going on here than what I thought. And so I think of it as a game. And that once you understand the rules of the game, you can play it. And that's what I was trying to get across in this book, is that, you think that if you're a good student in school and you just like came home every night and did your homework and, you kept your nose clean, you're nice to the teacher and all of that, you're going to get an A in your class. And if you just do that when you get in the workplace, the same thing's going to happen. And it's not true. Like the guy down the hallway that never comes to the meetings and doesn't return the emails, those things were probably not important. He was probably focused on the things that somebody higher up in the organization thought was the top priority. And he was really, focused on the priorities rather than trying to do everything perfectly, which I think a lot of times, people who, they're looked at as good workers, but they're not somebody that gets promoted. That's because they're spreading their energy like equally over everything rather than looking at like, okay, what do I have in front of me and what are the most important tasks that I should be investing my time in, and also how am I going to get comfortable with the fact that I'm not doing these things over here. um, and sometimes you can find other ways to get those things done, or you might just have to get comfortable with not doing them, and you will get rewarded if you're working on the right things.
Right. Cool. That's great context into the book, and yeah, I actually can relate to it as well. Obviously, you got also on another aspect politics as well internally, where that
Yeah.
person that's not going to the meetings might be doing the right things internally as well. Where, as you said, it's not what you see in the surface; it's behind the background as well, what's going on there as well. So I can totally understand that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, quite frankly, if I'm like a peer or an underling of that person, they could care less what I think, right? They care what their boss or what the head of that business thinks. And if they're aligning what they do with the expectations of that person who's in power, and then they're going to be rewarded for that, and they quite frankly probably don't care what I think, nor
Right?
should they.
Yeah, 100% get it. What are your interests and hobbies?
Well, as I mentioned, I like to travel under normal circumstances. My husband and I like to hike. We've during the COVID time, it's kind of funny because we live in an area where there's a lot of forest preserves, and for whatever reason, we never really explored them much. And during COVID, I think that we just realized, like, okay, we've got this treasure trove of really beautiful places around us. So we've um, we've been trying every weekend to kind of find another forest preserve near us and go out and explore it and hike it. And it's actually been really fun over the last few months to just see how the landscape changes. Like going in the summertime versus the fall when all the leaves are changing to we just went last Sunday and obviously this trees or here it's winter, um, no leaves on the trees and there's snow everywhere. It's just, really beautiful. Just trying to think like what else. I mean, I like to read. Um, like I said, I also like doing sort of crafty type things. I'm pretty artistic and um, I like painting and stuff like that.
Cool. And I believe you've got a your own podcast coming out soon called Marketing Mambo. Is that right?
Yeah,
Launching
Marketing
soon?
Mambo. Yeah, I
Yeah.
launched it on right at the beginning of the year, and I have a
Okay,
few
awesome.
episodes that are live, and I'm busy recording other ones, getting them in the can. It comes out every week, and it's I say that it's I chat with marketing movers and shakers from around the globe.
Amazing. And where does Terry see herself in 10 years from now?
Oh man, it's so funny to hear that question because that I don't know if it still is, but that used to be like a common interview question, like, what's your 5 year plan? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah,
And my answer is I have no idea.
yeah, yeah.
I really enjoy the journey. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, or if you had said to me 10 years ago, you're going to have left this company, you're going to be a published author, you're going to be a podcast host, you're going to be, an entrepreneur, I would have been like, what? But I just I really like to consider the opportunities at every step of the way, and in some ways like follow my heart. I mean, I'm not a crazy person. I wouldn't say like I'm going to sell everything and move to India, but I am a calculated risk taker, and it's super exciting to do that and to see things pay off. It's fun.
Astonishing. And just where do you see now? Obviously, you mentioned earlier there's a new president. Where do you see the United States positioned into the future, generally
Well,
speaking?
I don't want to get too political, but I feel like it's safe to hope again. And I this country, and I think that it stands for some really good things, and I think that it can be um, we say that we're united and that we're the country of opportunity, and I truly believe that we are, and I really want to see the country live up to its promise. I think that under President Biden that we are going to see that. He's been a career politician, and I know for a lot of people that is kind of a dirty word, but I look at it like he knows how to use the levers of government. And with everything that we're going through right now with the pandemic, we really need to use the might of our government to get everyone vaccinated, to get everybody on the same page and moving towards big and great things. One of the things that I would love to see him do is put a big infrastructure plan in place, because it's been something that here in the United States we've been talking about for a long time, that like both in terms of like roads and bridges and stuff like that. I think it's been a long time since things have really been updated and maintained at a high level, and I think that that would be helpful. And I also think that it could really drive a lot of economic benefits, like even tourism and travel, but also putting in broadband internet all over the whole country, because there's parts of our country, there's a very large part of the country that's very rural, and I think the fact that in very rural areas that people don't have ready and dependable access to intranet causes there to be a real divide. And I think that if there were, reliable intranet available everywhere, with this trend towards being able to work virtually, that I think more people would probably move into some of the more rural areas of the country, and maybe we wouldn't have such a stark divide, and there would be more opportunity, which I think that with the change, and a lot of manufacturing jobs have gone away in the United States, they've been offshored, and so there's a lot of people that have been left in a situation where they don't have access to good paying jobs. Reliable internet everywhere, and then companies could set up offices in less expensive areas, and people could have access to good jobs. So that's kind of the direction that I see things going in. And I think that there's probably so many opportunities that could be leveraged that are probably even beyond what I can even imagine.
That's really great insights, and thanks for sharing your opinion. Just touching on the vaccine, are you happy to get the vaccine?
I have signed up. I've got myself on the waiting list. As soon as I can get it, I'll go get it.
Awesome. Terry, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I wish you all the best with your book. And to anybody listening, grab a copy of it. There's only one left currently on Amazon.
I'm sure they'll
But
print more.
I'm sure they will too. But yeah, thanks for coming on, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Nick. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, have a great day.
Okay, you too.